after a while, it was just finding connection with other individuals and trying to tune into something that was bigger and greater than myself. Some might call it a higher power, some might call it spiritual entity, some might call it a God. But just instead of trying to live selfishly and trying to live out of fear, trying to help other people instead.
I'm excited to be speaking with Craig Perry, recovery advocate, classical guitarist, and firefighter. Craig earned his Master's of Music in Classical Guitar Performance from the San Francisco Conservatory of Music. He's described as a uniquely elegant classical guitarist with a highly expressive and dynamic blend of classical, jazz, and original material. A performer, composer, and guitar instructor, he launched his debut album entitled Himself in 2013, and he's currently working on his second album. As a firefighter, Craig was formerly on the wildland team for the Marin County Fire Department, and he's currently a municipal firefighter for the Orange County Fire Authority. An active member in AA, he's spent the past 5 years as a recovery advocate for individuals struggling with addiction and alcoholism. Craig, welcome to the show.
Wow, thank you so much for having me. It's great to catch up with you.
We first got to know each other through music. We did a few memorable collaborations together about 10 years ago now. I remember you being so fun and supportive to make music with. How did you get started on the guitar?
For me, and I think for most guitarists, I started off as a teenager wanting to play music that was loud and fast and obnoxious. My roots are definitely in punk, rock, and metal. But I was exposed to some very good instructors at a relatively young age. They kind of steered me towards and exposed me to jazz and classical. And one thing kind of led to the next. I auditioned for a fine arts magnet music school in high school. I was fortunate enough to be accepted into that. There, I was studying jazz and classical and music theory every day. And then I wanted to keep the ball rolling, so I pursued classical guitar for my undergrad in Richmond, Virginia, at Virginia Commonwealth University. And that's kind of when I started falling in love with composing and really falling in love with performing, especially with other people, and gaining confidence and an understanding of the classical world, all that it entails, the challenges, the successes, really the demands of just being a classical musician. And then when I moved to San Francisco, I knew that there was a very renowned conservatory there. That was around the years when I first met you and some of our mutual friends. And that led to auditioning for and pursuing my master's at that conservatory, which was another great experience. But ultimately, I think composing has been my favorite element alongside teaching. Seeing the progress with students, seeing students get excited, seeing students overcome challenges. That's definitely been a favorite for mine, for sure.
Talk a little bit about composing and how that uses your brain, maybe in a different way that playing guitar or playing compositions written by other people. What is it like to write your own music?
So the first analogy that I can think of is being a small kid and playing with Legos, but without any instructions. Because what you're making with music and what I was making with Legos at the time had never been made before. And each brick has its own little function, and each brick can be used in all these different ways. And it's along those same lines that I treat composing. I might start with a whim of an idea or something that comes out through improvising. And then all I try to do is just assemble it the same way I would assemble a Lego set, only I'm the one making the instructions for it. So it's kind of unique and fun, very exciting in that way. But it definitely takes time for me to let it grow naturally and not trying to put too much force and too much pressure on it. It was a blessing and a curse being exposed to certain techniques and certain elements of craft for composing. Because I would sit there and I would say what are some of my options? And I would go through these variables that I could use or these procedures that I could do that I was taught in school. But the downside of that is it takes some of that intuitive, natural tendency away, just to let something grow and develop on its own without rules or tradition. It's a very rewarding experience to once it is finished, though it's very hard to say, okay, it's done, double bar line, not going to mess with it anymore. And more often than not, when I do conclude a piece after a few months, after kind of performing it live a few times, I'm kind of already tweaking things and changing things subtly a little bit until I'm finally, fully excited about it and fully satisfied. And it's a beautiful process. I enjoy it very much.
I love this analogy to Legos because I currently live with an 8-year-old master builder, and I find little Legos all around the house. And now I will just think of them as building blocks for creation. And that's wonderful. You've spent the last 5 years as a recovery advocate. What's been your personal journey with addiction?
So it's very common for people to have certain things that they turn to in order to either mask or hide from or suppress an uncomfortable feeling. I think it's very human-like to want to avoid anything that makes us uncomfortable. And it's very human-like to want connection. And everybody has their own means of how they seek that inner connection with themselves, or how they seek hiding from an uncomfortable feeling or dealing with an uncomfortable feeling. And some of it can be very subconscious, like it can be over consuming or eating or shopping. People might turn to television or video games, just to seek something that makes them feel better or to enhance an already good feeling. Some people might exercise at an unhealthy level. Some people might turn to substances at an unhealthy level, like I was. I think what needs to be, or what's important, is making sure that things are balanced and in check. When it's recognized that something might not be balanced and that it's causing harm, it's important to ask, how do I arrest these feelings? How do I replace this with something that is healthy? Is this really what I want to be turning to? What can I be turning to instead? And what's the root cause of it? What am I trying to run from? What am I discontent about? Why am I feeling so restless? And for me personally, after a while, it was just finding connection with other individuals and trying to tune into something that was bigger and greater than myself. Some might call it a higher power. Some might call it a spiritual entity. Some might call it a God. It's to each their own. But just instead of trying to live selfishly and trying to live out of fear, trying to help other people instead. That's really helped me a lot, kind of dig myself out of that. And really, that is where I feel the most happiest, instead of either in isolation or doing something selfish or making myself feel better with substances. My personal struggles have led to this reward of connecting with other people and who have been in similar situations, who are in similar situations, seeing other people grow out of that, seeing other people get their lives back, seeing other people find peace without a negative means or something disadvantageous. So, we all have these struggles. It's just how far are we willing to go before we want to make any change? And for me personally, my own experience, making that change definitely involved connecting with other people and being of service to other people.
When you think of your experiences with both recovery and with music or the arts in general, how do these worlds connect or overlap for you?
So they both share this underlying means of being of service. So in music, I'm not as happy with music when it's just for me to receive an applause or a compliment. If anything, that makes me feel a little uncomfortable. But what I am happy about with music is when somebody is left inspired enough to pursue something on their own, or with music, if a student is motivated enough to go for an audition or competition, or if they're like super stoked at the progress of a piece that they're working on, or if I'm playing for somebody's wedding and the bride really wanted this piece for her special moment of walking down the aisle, and it comes out well and it sounds good and she's just stoked on it. Those moments are very special to me. How can I help somebody else? How can we share this together? And also the moments of playing with another person and creating something special together. There's moments of service within music of bringing family and friends together to sit and enjoy and have a pause, from their everyday life, whether it be for inspiration or just enjoyment or relaxation. And with recovery, it's the same thing. It's that service to somebody else. It's how can I be of use to this person? How can I help this person? Because I've been there and I needed help too.
You released your debut album entitled Himself in 2013, And you're currently working on a follow-up album of original compositions called Tension and Release. What are you exploring in this upcoming album?
That's a great question. I would really like Tension and Release to be more collaborative. So the first half of it is already completed. It's a 6-movement suite titled The Emperor's Suite. And this is sort of my interpretation of like the lineage of mankind. There are these mythological references, these tales of growth, periods of just portraying loss, and then it kind of concludes with this idea of perseverance and these references for Prometheus. There's references to Rome. There's references to Blackbeard losing one of his ships and loss. There's references to Sir Ernest Shackleton and his tale of crossing the Arctic Pole by ship. There's a book called The Endurance named after that, or his ship was called The Endurance. And so there's a lot of areas that I'm trying to kind of pay tribute to. And the second half of that, which is also a 6-movement suite, is titled The Reinvention of Man. And this is where I have all these ideas of trying to compose alongside it with other instruments and trying to write for other instruments. And with the Emperor's Suite being all solo guitar and the second half kind of being an answer to that, sort of a response to it, what I have in mind is this growth and this development. I think the best way to illustrate that growth, this sort of reinvention of man or reinvention of myself, is to include other individuals and other instruments. Have that effect of being stronger with somebody than individually. And I would really like to portray that in the second suite. So yeah, it'd be overall just 2 suites that make up the album. The first 6 movements to the suite, The Emperor's Suite, and the second 6 movements to the suite, The Reinvention of Man. So it's very exciting. It's very daunting at times, but I'm very excited for the progress of it so far. Let's take a short pause to reflect on this question. What's a big project that you're working on that might take years to come to fruition? Outside of hosting this podcast, I partner with leaders in the workplace to turn professional challenges into leadership successes and career progression. I love working with executive leaders, aspiring C-suite professionals, and of course, ampersands. If any of this sounds interesting to you, reach out to me at jessicawan.com. That's JESSICAWAN.com. Now, back to the show. You went on from Music Conservatory to Fire Academy, which is not maybe a traditional path. What sparked the interest in becoming a firefighter? I think it stemmed at an early age from growing up in a military family. The community I was lucky enough to grow up in, with my dad's work buddies and their wives being close to my mother and their kids being close to me. I didn't realize that at the time, but that community was very special and it turned out to be a very big part of my upbringing. And the fire service has a similar community. We're essentially a second family. We care for each other and we're all super tight and super close. And so, my father spent 40 years in the Navy and his youngest brother spent 10 in the Navy. And then he became a fireman. And I remember going on ride-alongs with my uncle and and him kind of, telling me how much he liked it and showing me what the job consisted of, and just kind of, I could see that he was having fun. He was working hard. He was just really enjoying it. And it just seemed like a really cool and interesting career path. And this is throughout my 20s when I didn't quite know my path yet. I was pursuing music, but I was on and off the fence of going into the military myself and trying to find something that was a little more stable and consistent. And I think subconsciously, I wanted to be part of something bigger and better than myself, a community or a brotherhood, if you will. And I wanted to be around a bunch of motivated and exciting group of people, I wanted to be doing things that were selfless. I wanted to be doing things that were fun. And I certainly didn't want to go into work and have the day kind of be like a Groundhog's Day. I wanted something that was different every day. And I was drawn to all the excitement of the fire service. And I think we're all drawn to the idea of riding around a big red fire engine and, being able to save some cats out of some trees and take a nap or hang out, cook with your buddies, work hard and play hard. And so there are all these pros to wanting to be a part of something bigger than myself that really grabbed my interest.
How do you think your experiences over this last decade as a firefighter, as a recovery advocate, how do you think those are going to come into play in any way in this new album?
Biggest lessons from those two avenues of working in the fire department and being, heavily involved in recovery is this lesson of humility, and this lesson of trying to ground yourself and trying to trust the process, not trying to control everything, letting go, essentially having faith, having trust. And if I can apply that to my compositions, not trying to get too far ahead of myself, not trying to be the next Debussy or the next Beethoven, just staying grounded, staying within my abilities, seeking suggestions of others even, especially when it comes time to trying to compose for other instruments. And ultimately just reminding myself that it's not only for me. Like, this is intended to be a gift to listeners. This is intended to be for other people to enjoy. And I need to be thinking about those other people as well throughout. It'll certainly kind of make it more special for me, and it'll definitely make it more special to gift it to the listener.
What does it feel like when you play the guitar?
It feels like, at times, it feels like nothing else really matters. A lot of people can relate to that feeling, at least I hope, of being so hyper-focused on something that the rest of the world just doesn't even exist. Somebody can relate to that while they're dancing, or somebody can relate to that while they're painting, or whatever. There are times in life where all of us are so fixated on what's in front of us, so hyper-focused on something so beautiful that nothing else matters, nothing else even comes to mind. And there are moments like that with guitar that come up, and there are moments with guitar where it's very frustrating. And I'm feeling that exact opposite of that, feeling where I don't know what to do next. I don't know what the next move would be for that, that next Lego piece in my composition, or I don't know why my fingers aren't cooperating, or I don't know why I can't express something the way that I want to, or hear something the way that I want to hear it. But when everything is kind of in sync, and when I'm more so an observer than the one trying to control what's going on with music and playing, it's you're just listening from the outside and you just don't feel anything. It's a beautiful experience, and I truly hope that everyone can feel that with whatever they decide to put their attention to or their efforts into.
Yeah, it's flow, finding your flow in what you love. You've mentioned some themes around the connections between your work as a recovery advocate, a musician, and a firefighter, service orientation, humility, and I think also this flow and presence I also see in all of these. What other themes do you think tie together your work?
All three of those, they all involve a willingness to improve and a willingness to not remain complacent. With the trainings that we do for music, technique, with ear training, it's to improve and not lose progress, which losing progress happens way too easily. With firefighting, definitely complacency can be a very dangerous thing. You want to always be training, you want to always be improving, and you don't want to think to yourself like, oh, I've got this. And it needs to also be said that I'm very new in the fire department with this being my career. I have so much to learn. I have so much that I need to gain experience in and become better in and more fluent with. So there's so much more to the craft that I cannot sit back and think to myself like, oh, I got this. I don't need to train, because that's a very dangerous, very, potentially deadly mindset. And the same thing applies with recovery. One of the phrases that we use is that all we have is a daily reprieve, meaning a temporary arrest of this disease to turn away from things that are potentially harmful. And every single day I wake up essentially with untreated, either alcoholism or untreated addiction, or someone might wake up with untreated gambling addictions, and just staying true to it. So staying very aware that if I'm not growing, then I'm essentially taking steps back. And for recovery, it's trying to grow spiritually. It's trying to grow with these new principles, this new way of living, that has all these principles that seem so simple and so basic and so easy to follow that everybody should follow. Something like being honest, or applying courage, or applying integrity, or willingness to help the next guy, or perseverance and spirituality. These principles that are very hard for people to grab onto when they're in the midst of addiction or alcoholism, but when we kind of commit to it and we kind of see some of those come to the surface, we find a new way to live. I mean, there's still things that need to be tended to every single day.
Yeah. So always learning. And I'm also seeing a sense of true commitment and dedication to that growth and forward progress. What is it like now having your firefighting job as kind of the day job and working on the album? How do you organize your time and your energy?
I would not say that I manage my time very well, or as well as I would like to. I try to make efforts for it. So with music, trying to fit that into my schedule. I heard a phrase once from one of my mentors in San Francisco. His name's Charles Boone. He was quoting a famous composer, I believe, but he said, the only thing you need to be a composer is a commission and a deadline. And I cannot resonate with that more. Because when I have something that is scheduled, or something that has a deadline, or someone paying me to write or to perform something, it's way easier for me to make the time than when I do not. I still teach. I still have compositions that I'm working on, performances scheduled here and there. But it's a very harsh realization that if I did not have these deadlines, I would not be putting this much into the forefront. So for me personally, I need to have these goals established and known. I need to have these things penciled in. It just makes it a lot better for me personally. Still working on that.
Yeah. When do you hope to release Tension and Release?
I wish it was released a couple of years ago if I had it finished. Honestly, it's been way too long. It is nice now being able to have some momentum with it. It's nice that the first half is done, and looking at it now, this very daunting second half that I've been putting off, I'm starting to pick at it, starting to make sketches. I have one of the 6 movements completely finished, and a couple others that are making their way, starting to put ideas together. But once I'm in motion, it's easier for me to keep that momentum going. But if I'm stagnant and it's just everything's blank, it's much harder for me to start. So because of some of these ideas that I have, or some of these goals or deadlines, if you will, it's ramping up that momentum for me to start taking the time and remembering how much I enjoy the process. And I think it's very easy for me to forget how much I love it until I'm sitting there with my instrument in hand and I'm like, why have I stopped this? Why has it taken me so long to do this? Like, I love this. So having these little things, these little motivators, is definitely helping the bigger picture.
Yeah. Helping that inertia. If you're in motion, you stay in motion. That's great. What advice do you have for people who are pursuing or thinking of pursuing an ampersand life?
Everybody has these multifaceted lives. Everybody has at least a couple things they're interested in, at least a couple things they love. as long as they're doing those things, a lot of good can come from it. I don't think there needs to be limitations or titles like, oh, I'm only this, I'm only that. I'm only a woodworker, I'm only a BMX rider. Everybody has a lot of things that they are, and whether it's a mother or a cook or someone that's very good at gardening, someone that's very good at meditating, someone that's very good at teaching, there's all these things that we can identify with. And yeah, as long as we kind of tune into what we love, anybody and everybody can be an ampersand.
Through these interviews, we're co-creating the Ampersand Manifesto, Principles for Leading a Multi-Passionate Life. What do you think should be included in the manifesto?
The biggest realization for me was that nothing that I pursue, I could do by myself, whether it's a certain career path or a certain hobby or a certain goal. I couldn't do any of these things just me on my own. I've been lucky enough to work alongside some very motivating and inspiring individuals. I've been fortunate to have some very high caliber instructors. I've been fortunate enough to have suggestions made to me by people that have carved the path ahead of me, in recovery. And none of these things that I've done or none of these things that I do would I have been able to do without them.
Yeah, we can't do it alone. Craig, it's been such a pleasure talking with you. Folks, you can find Craig's album, Himself, on Apple Music and Spotify. We'll include links in the show notes. If you liked this show, hit like, subscribe, and share with your friends and fellow ampersands. And if you're enjoying our show, please consider leaving a rating or a short review so that more people can find out about the show. I had a chance to listen back on my interview with Craig, and I wanted to share a few key takeaways. 1, I'm so inspired by the way Craig talks about his work and his motivation to do the things he does. He truly lives by his commitment to serving others. In my line of work as an executive coach, I sometimes work with folks who feel like they've lost their way in their careers. When Craig talked about the teamwork, camaraderie, and brotherhood of the fire department, it made me think that these things are probably pretty common to want in a workplace. But some of us don't verbalize it as much as we should. A lot of people want to be part of something bigger than themselves. 2, I can relate to what Craig shared about the special opportunity that you get as a musician to perform in front of others. It's a blend of both inner awareness and flow, and losing yourself to the music, and being in tune with the audience's reception, and always keeping them in mind. It's a really unique experience that isn't quite like anything else. 3, I love this idea of daily practice and improvement as a through line in all of Craig's work. And I see this very much in myself, in both work and the way that I conduct my life. Whether I'm taking up a new wellness routine or returning to a craft that I haven't done for a while, it's that practice and commitment to getting better that makes it very joyful and fulfilling.
My day job, if you will, as a fireman, it's ultimately, how can I help this next person? When I'm in those moments, that's where I feel that I'm at the most peace.